All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at an issue that one of my students brought up, and I thought it was a good issue. And we're going to be stepping through this, just kind of explaining a little bit about how PowerShell ISE works when we have multiple windows and we have functions in different windows. So we're going to go ahead and do this demo. We have in window or Untitled 1, we have a function called add1s. In Untitled 2, we have a function called add2s. And in window 3, we have a function called add3s. Now, I don't know sometimes if the IntelliSense pops up, it does or doesn't on video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to remember to describe what I'm seeing in IntelliSense as I'm doing this. If I were to type on line 10, add ones, it should be of note that right now IntelliSense is popping up add ones, right? It recognizes add ones in this script window here, and in this, you could say the scope of this script window here. I'm not doing this on the script pane yet, but on this script window. If I were to do add twos, it doesn't recognize that, and that's because add twos isn't here. Okay, so that was one of the issues, right? So it recognizes what's here, but keep in mind I haven't actually executed anything, so I have not actually called this yet, and I'll let you all know when I called this. But when I do add twos, and again I think I didn't say that, but there's no add twos that's popping up in IntelliSense, even though in Untitled 2 we see add twos, right? Okay, so the same thing applies when I go down here, and I'm now in the basically PowerShell command line equivalent, and I kind of like doing ISE because it has these two contrasts. However, a lot of people just prefer the command line approach with PowerShell, and that's perfectly fine. This to me just is better for developing and then testing, developing and testing, and so on and so forth. So if I go here and I were to try to type in add ones, it doesn't find that. And the reason why it doesn't find it here, and this was the student's issue, is because this has not been executed yet. So this isn't actually loaded yet, right? This recognizes here in this command line window, it recognizes built-in functions that have already been loaded in PowerShell, like add content. I'm highlighting that right now in IntelliSense. So again, I'm not sure if that shows up on your screen, but if it doesn't, I'm highlighting this add content. So it has all of these different functions that are already built in, correct? But it doesn't actually recognize anything that hasn't been applied yet. I have not launched this add ones. Likewise, this is not built into the computer. Now, if I go here, so I'm going to type this just line, this is a comment block, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to execute this now. And I'm only typing the comment block just so that y'all know that I'm about to run this script. So I'm going to hit F5 and run the script. Okay, so I now have run the script. And so now I'm going to do add ones, and we'll see add ones now pops up in the command line. Now add twos does not. Why? Well, because I haven't executed add twos yet, right? So the same thing applies. Let me go here. I have that out. Now if I go to this window and I were to say add ones, it is there. Hold on. Oops. And it's hard to type here. Okay, add ones, it's here because I executed it in this window, right? So it is now loaded, so it does recognize it. Likewise, because add twos is in this window, it will recognize add twos as well. However, if I try to do add threes, there's no add threes because that has not been executed yet, okay? And so the same thing down here, if I were to try to add twos, still not going to be here. Why? Because it hasn't been executed. If I were to execute this, of course, then it will actually find it in this window, and IntelliSense highlights add twos down here. So one thing that we can do, and this is just kind of a technique that I use a lot in developing with PowerShell, I can take this function here, and I'm going to create a new function called add fours, right? Now, keep in mind, I have not actually called this yet. I have called this, so this is loaded, but I have not called add fours yet. So I'm going to do fours, and we'll see that if add ones hadn't been loaded, and add ones would have shown up in this window. Add ones is here, and add fours is also here, right? These are in the same window. So for instance, if I had a file that was, let's say, reading data from, a function that was reading data from a file, as a case in point, I could include that, and then below that function that's reading data from a file, I could have like the next step in this script pane here, okay? So that way I could execute it that way. But keep in mind that depending on what has been executed in, let's say, this window versus this window versus what's available in this script pane, unless this has been executed, isn't going to know about add twos. Likewise, this script pane is not going to know about add ones until it's executed. So it's all about kind of the scope of what's been executed, what is actually present and what's not. And that's part of the reason why with scripts, if I'm doing a step-by-step and let's say I'm testing, I don't want my, let's say, steps in different windows. You can do it that way for sure, but I don't want it if I'm testing it. Now, I understand why we would want those as separate scripts because I might call them differently. But when I'm testing, I'll usually put them in the same window. Or what I'll do is when I'm done developing, let's say add ones in this case, I'll execute it, then I'll execute add twos as I'm done, and then I'll test it that way in the command line window.